If you're tuning in right now, we're getting things rolling, waiting for the stream to fire up on all cylinders. If you're not familiar with the program, we like to multi-stream on a number of different locations, the home base, of course, being YouTube, and that is always the last to kick off, and it looks like we're now live. So we're live on Facebook, we're live on Twitter, on Periscope, we're also on YouTube, and of course, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney. What you're watching here today is a show called Watching the Watchers. What we do here is monitor police misconduct. We want to hold prosecutors, judges, politicians, anybody involved in the criminal justice system. We want to hold them accountable. Now, before we dive into the content, you'll notice that things are a little bit different around here. So we actually moved offices. Our law firm is growing. We moved from a smaller space into a much bigger space. We're hiring people. We're making some great additions, all in the effort of we want to serve more people. We want to help more people get their lives back on track. We say it all the time that we help good people charged with crime. Many people are charged with crimes. Doesn't make them a bad person. You know, oftentimes it's just one bad night, one bad incident. Doesn't mean that a person's entire life should be upended as a result of that. And so our office is moved. And so I've got some work to do up here. You can see here that my wall is very white. I've got some stuff hung up there. Lighting's a little bit off. We've got these motion sensor lights that shut off every 20 minutes or so. And so we've decided to skip the motion sensor lights. I've got some lighting here and we're figuring out our technology. And so thank you so much for joining us and being a part of it. Now, as I said, that's all the announcement stuff that I've got for today. What I want to do is dive into the news. We want to really hold accountable police officers. We call them badpopo on this show because unfortunately what we have here in our criminal justice system, you know, we've represented many thousands of people, and over the course of those years, over the course of our time in the justice system, we see a lot of really bad things, and unfortunately we have a lot of bad guys and gals masquerading as good guys, and they're sort of existing in our justice system, and they're hiding behind their gun and a badge. And the only way that we're going to see some real movement, some real change within our justice system, which is something that the entire country is clamoring for right now, is by shining the bright light right on these departments, right on these people who are involved in this malfeasance, in this misconduct, because it is very rampant. Only with your help, with the public clamoring for some changes, are we going to see any actual progress being made. And that's the whole point of the show. So let's dive into it. We've got some news. Something's going on in the presidential elections. And what the heck does that have to do with criminal law? Well, Joe Biden just announced that Kamala, I'm probably going to butcher her name a number of different times. Kamala, people are saying it all different ways. Kamala Harris is somebody who used to be a prosecutor. She was the attorney general for California. She was a district attorney, and she now has just joined the Joe Biden ticket. Much to my dismay, you know, of all of the people who were involved in this election this year, Kamala was probably the worst in my mind. And it's not necessarily because of her politics. If you're a regular of this show, I try not to align too much with one side or the other. It's just not something that I think is very productive. I want to be a free thinker, and the parties have it wrong in a number of different areas. So when I'm talking about Kamala and I'm talking about the Biden campaign, I'm really mostly kind of grossed out by her record, by Kamala's record as a prosecutor. It is horrendous. And she has sort of repositioned herself for this election as somebody who is a reformer, somebody who is, you know, behind Jussie Smollett, somebody who's behind George Floyd. She's sort of championing the cause, the movement here. But she was the one responsible for putting people in prison for marijuana offenses and not providing exculpatory evidence to other people who've been charged with crimes. So this is a big deal. You know, this is somebody who, in my mind, look, she's got a lot that we can rag on her for. She's got the whole history with, you know, extramarital sexual relationships and all of those things, which are all gross in their own right. But what we're talking about on this show is her record as a prosecutor, which is very, very bad. And for her to now suddenly flip the script and say, I'm somebody who's been for justice reform and for progress in this area, is totally disingenuous. So, the bad news is that we have somebody who is literally a breath away from the presidency. If Biden gets elected, Kamala's number 2. She's the vice president. She's going to be in charge of a lot of these things, and her record for criminal justice, her record for putting people in prison for marijuana offenses and for refusing to give people information about their crimes, refusing to exonerate people, it's really, really gross behavior. This sort of the epitome of everything that I think is wrong with the justice system. This woman embodies it, and it has nothing to do. She's got policies on green energy and taxation and all of those things. I've got issues with all politicians on a number of different issues, but Kamala was the one who used to be a prosecutor, and now she's on basically the top of the ticket. Many people are saying that she's sort of the pseudo president, or because of Biden's mental state, which is a separate subject. But my point is, she's right there. She's a stone's throw away from the presidency, and she's got a troubling record. This new come to light, come to Jesus moment is welcomed. We're happy that she's seeing the light on some of her malfeasance, but she was a big part of the problem for a number of years, and she used her record as a prosecutor to shotgun her to the front of the line. She used her relationships and her history and her record there as to become a senator, and then to now run for president and become the vice presidential candidate. So it's a bummer that she's on there. It's a bummer that we have to see her so close to a position of power that really has a strong impact throughout the rest of the country. But the good news is, we now have a lot of content for the foreseeable future. Kamala's record is so bad and so long that we can talk about it for ages. So we have 70-something days until the election. I may decide to just live stream every day because we need to get through a lot of this material. So today we're not going to go into, all of the different webs and all of the different angles and the different roads that we could explore with Kamala, but we are going to talk about some of the broad strokes. I want to just give you a quick article. There's an article from reason.com that does a good job of sort of fleshing out a lot of the big bullet points. And so let's take a look at that. Let's dive in. So this article comes from reason.com. Now, if you are, depending on what your political leanings are, reason.com, some people will look at that site and they'll say, those guys are libertarians, they're right wingers, they're conservatives, they, do whatever you want with that. It's something that I think the record speaks for itself. So just because it comes from a website that you may not approve of doesn't mean that the information's necessarily bad. So let's take a look at it. So here recently, Harris positioned herself during the primary campaign as a reformer who has tirelessly worked to correct the abuses of the criminal justice system, which is wrong. And we're going to talk to you about that. Her record is a huge part of the problem. She confronted Biden in the debates about his atrocious record on race and law and order policies. And so, she's claiming that he's got a bad record, which is true, right? Joe Biden was one of the authors of the 1994 crime bill, if I'm not mistaken, and some other legislation sort of during the previous generation, this tough on crime attitude that a lot of the politicians had back then that's responsible for a lot of the problems that we're seeing today. The stuff that was set in place in the 90s, the bill is becoming due. The George Floyd protests, these Black Lives Matter protests, the things that we're seeing pop up in Portland and throughout the country, these are all, this is the bill. These policies have been in place for 30 years, and now people are fed up with it, and that's what you're seeing on the streets. Well, Joe Biden had a big part of that, right? The Clinton era did, Hillary Clinton did, Joe Biden did. These are their policies that we're now seeing become massively problematic, and Kamala Harris was somebody who was enforcing those policies. So it's funny that during the primary campaign, she's now going to attack Joe for it when she was also a huge part of the problem. Then Joe taps her to be vice president. So of course, bygones will be bygones. They're not going to talk about that stuff anymore. So what is the problem with Kamala in my mind? Well, the article starts off, it goes through a lot here. She talks about basically she was penalizing sex workers. So from a libertarian standpoint, the idea is if two consenting adults want to engage in sexual contact with each other and one's willing to pay for it, what is the government's business in that private transaction? What's the big deal, right? I mean, if a woman knows what she's doing and a man knows what she's doing, or two men or two women or whatever genders is going on in that situation, what's the government's role in that? Why do they need to be involved at all? And so that's something, that's kind of more of a policy issue that this article starts to go into. Reason is more libertarian minded. And so that's something, you could have a reasonable disagreement about that in my mind. But what is not something that is excusable are these different incidents where she's involved in what I would consider to be actual prosecutorial misconduct. So I want to define what that is. What is prosecutorial misconduct? Well, in layman's terms, it starts with this idea that a prosecutor, somebody who is sworn into office to bring criminal charges against somebody else, they need to have sort of a higher oath of duty. They've got this really, really important responsibility that they have to carry out in order to help our society function. And so they take a special oath, they take a badge, and basically, they're supposed to be enacting justice. They're not supposed to be going after convictions or having a win rate or any of those things. When cases come across their desk, if they're problematic, then they need to get rid of them. They need to dismiss them. They don't need to move forward and convict everybody on everything. And so prosecutorial misconduct is saying that, there are special rules for prosecutors because they have special powers. When a new charge is filed, a prosecutor has to read the charges, read the police reports, and then make a statement, what's called a probable cause statement, to say, I believe there's enough evidence here to move forward with these charges under these facts against this specific individual. Then those charges get filed, and it goes through the entire criminal justice system. As it's going through that system, if a prosecutor doesn't give you certain evidence, so let's say a cop lied on the stand or a cop lied in their police report, and the prosecutor knows about that, but they don't tell you about that, well, how are you as the defense, how are you supposed to know? Well, you wouldn't, right? Because you don't have access to the same information and the same materials that the prosecutor's office does. They hold all the cards. They have all the information, all of the data, all of the body cameras, all of the police reports, all of the chemical analyses that have been done, all of the witness statements, all of the 911 calls, the GPS tracking, the DNA evidence, all of that stuff is in their possession. And so they need to have a very, very high standard of care, a very high duty, because if there's a little bit of ethical problems when they're in possession of those things, the defense would never know about it. We would never know about it because we don't have access to the same information. So they've got this really high standard, and what happens when they violate that standard? Well, it's called prosecutorial misconduct. And so the article starts here, and it's got a couple of kind of really, well, let me show you. So here's what we've got. She says, in her memoir, Harris decries America's deep and dark history of people using the power of the prosecutor as an instrument of justice. But she repeatedly went to bat for dirty prosecutors. And the article starts here. You can see it links. These are separate news articles for every one of these links that Kamala was involved in. And the first one is her office appealed the dismissal of a case in which a prosecutor had fabricated a confession to secure a conviction. So somebody, literally a prosecutor who was working under her, the allegation is that they fabricated a confession out of somebody, which is not uncommon, actually. This happens all the time. Confessions are things that happen under duress. If you're brought in, you're being questioned by the police. They put you in a room. You can be in the room for hours and hours on end. Police will ask you a million different questions, the same questions a million different times, with other people asking you and coming until you give them something that they can latch onto. That's going to be your confession. So here, the allegation is that a prosecutor fabricated a confession just to secure a conviction. A confession, if you confess to a crime, it's really easy to get a conviction. And so this comes to light, and they're filing motions, appealing the case, and she decides that she is going to continue to fight on behalf of the prosecutor who secured the fabricated confession. So rather than saying that prosecutor was a piece of garbage, we should fire him from our office and actually disbar that individual, she says, oh, no, we're going to fight this. So the trial court presumably dismissed the case, and she's appealing the dismissal, and she's basically standing behind the prosecutor who did that. And that's just one incident, right? Well, that could happen. Anybody can make a mistake on one case, but she's got a pattern of doing this. She also fought an appeal in a case where the prosecutor lied to a jury during a trial. So another one of her prosecutors tells a lie, and the defense appeals the case. Well, her office comes back and they counter that. So some of this you would think, right? I mean, that's her job. She is the head prosecutor. She's got to stand behind her office. That's two incidents of bad prosecutors who are getting away with things. In 2015, not long ago, okay? This is not ancient history. This is 5 years ago, folks. She tried to stop the removal of the Orange County District Attorney's Office from a murder trial after it repeatedly failed to turn over evidence to the defense. So right here, she tried to stop the removal of the Orange County District Attorney's Office. And so what does that mean, right? So if you're involved in a situation where you've got a defense and a prosecutor, and they're trying to negotiate about a criminal case, the defense is going to ask that the prosecutor gives them the evidence. We want the evidence because we want to see what your allegations are. What are you claiming actually happened? We need to see that so that we can build our defense. Well, Kamala's office didn't give them any of the evidence. They said, no, we're going to hang on to that for whatever reason they have. And when they were actually trying to move the case forward, move the case up, what the defense probably tried to do is say, hey, in light of this violation, we know that this prosecutor's office did not give us the materials that we needed. Because they failed to do that, they're acting in bad faith. That's prosecutorial misconduct. We're going to ask that they be excluded from this process moving forward. They're liars and they're not good prosecutors. It's misconduct. And so she is now, of course, fighting that. Nope, no misconduct here. We're just going to continue to do things as ordinary, as they ordinarily would. She is somebody who now is claiming to be pro-legalization, is what she says here. But as her attorney general, she opposed marijuana legalization as late as 2014. Which is a big deal. I mean, more and more states are moving towards legalization or at least decriminalization. In Arizona, we have medical marijuana, where I think the marijuana ballot the initiative is going to be really close to passing if it's successful getting on the ballot this year. But Colorado and Nevada and a lot of these other states are moving in that direction. Kamala was opposed to that as far back as 2014, which is really not that far away. This is a big issue. There are a lot of people who are sitting in prison for stupid marijuana, dumb, nonviolent drug offenses. Absolutely, our prisons and jails are full of these offenses. And many of these people are in custody because of Kamala's position on this. For 2014 and presumably her career leading up until that point, she was somebody who was putting people in prison for marijuana. Now, fast forward 5 years, she's running for office, and now it's important that she, is on the other side of these issues. So now she's a reformer, which you can say what you want about that. In my mind, this is somebody who basically kind of say whatever she wants to execute. The ends justify the means, in other words. So as long as it gets her where she's going, she's going to be able to say whatever she wants. She opposed marijuana legalization as late as 2014, and people are sitting in prison over it. What else did Kamala do? She promoted civil asset forfeiture without a conviction as a way to fight drug rings. So promoted civil asset forfeiture without a conviction as a way to fight drug rings. This is another topic that we've discussed here on this show. We've actually did an interview with a gentleman named Scott who is on this channel. He was on this channel talking about civil asset forfeiture. So what does this mean? Well, let's say that you're stopped and you're suspected of dealing drugs or transporting drugs. You haven't been convicted yet. You haven't had a trial. No charges have been, formally filed, or maybe they have, and you just haven't been convicted yet, or whatever is going on with your case. You haven't had your day in court. You have not had a jury with your peers listen to the evidence and then find you guilty or not guilty. None of that's happened. But what is civil asset forfeiture? Well, that means that doesn't matter. We can still take all your stuff. That car that you were driving in, we're going to take it. Your house and your property, we're going to take it. We think that you were involved in a drug ring, even though you had no due process. You've never been convicted of anything. We're just going to start taking stuff from you: cars, jewelry, watches, weapons, firearms, your home. And I've worked on cases like this where charges never actually even came. And it was a never-ending battle to try to get our client's stuff back. The government just swoops in, takes all of your stuff, and you've never been convicted of a crime. You've never been charged with anything. This was a huge, huge problem. And states are now starting to shift that. We're trying to, there's reforms all across the country to limit these civil asset forfeitures. Basically, it's illegal theft. They can come in and take whatever they want from you, but by just saying, well, we suspect that you were involved in a drug crime, or we suspect you were involved in a gang crime. And so it's sort of this civil, non-criminal area of the law, and the rules are a lot different. You've probably watched a lot of the movies and the TV shows, and so you know that when a person is charged with a crime, they have to be proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Civil law is totally different. It's a much, much lower standard. So they can just start taking stuff. And Kamala was somebody who stood behind that, was, again, somebody who was on the wrong side of the issues for a long time. And it doesn't stop there. Mass incarceration. Before her recent about face, Harris chose not to endorse proposed sentencing reforms on the California ballot in 2012, 2014, and she defended the constitutionality of cash bail until 2016. Huge problems. Okay, mandatory sentencing or sentencing reform. These are big issues. These are why people are sitting in prison, because of mandatory sentencing, because of stupid statutory laws that we have in place where you go to prison or you go to jail for really dumb crimes. Like I said, there are people in prison for marijuana crimes, nonviolent personal use of marijuana. They are in prison for that, in large part because it's mandatory sentencing, which means, so like in Arizona, for example, we have, it's a 3-strike rule. The first offense, you get kind of a slap on the wrist. Second offense is jail. Third offense is prison. So there are people in prison for marijuana. Now, Kamala did not have anything to do with Arizona laws, but the same thing was happening in California, and she took the same position back then. So no sentencing reforms in 2012, none in 2014, and then in 2016, she defended cash bail, which is another huge problem. Why? Because poor people don't have money to get out of jail. They just don't. They sit in custody, and what ends up happening is they plead guilty to charges that they shouldn't have never pled guilty to. And the reason they do that is because a prosecutor walks up to them and says, look, we know you're in custody right now, okay? We just arrested you for that domestic violence offense. Unfortunately, we're not going to let you out of custody unless you're able to post a cash bail, a cash bond of $10,000. Well, I don't have $10,000. Oh, okay. Well, in that case, then you're going to sit in custody until we resolve your case, meaning, you have another court date 30 days from now, so you're going to be in custody that whole time, unless you can come up with the money. Can you come up with the money? No, we can't. I don't have that money. Okay, well, you'll sit here, or I have another idea, or we can just resolve your case right now. Oh, well, why would I do that? I haven't seen the police report. I haven't talked to an attorney. I haven't investigated it. I don't know what the accusers are saying. I don't know anything about it. And they say, well, we'll have you sign this document. We'll close your case out. And once it's closed and once the judge enters it, they'll sentence you and they'll give you credit for being in here. And then they will release you. They'll just send you on your way. And the guy will go, well, shit, I want to get out of here. I don't want to be here. And they'll sign that document. They'll sign the plea agreement and they'll get out of custody. They will have no counsel. They'll have no advice from, an outside attorney. They'll have no opportunity to go do their independent research. So they're being kind of strong-armed into taking a plea deal that they should have never taken. And it's because of this stupid system where the rich people, they're going to be able to afford it. This type of policy is really hitting hard, in particular, the poor and the minority communities. These are the people who are mostly impacted by this cash bail policy. And so that's another thing that Kamala Harris was in favor of up until 2016. 4 years ago. Now she has this come to Jesus moment, this epiphany. Oh, That type of really tough on crime, I'm gonna just wipe out the criminals and be an aggressive prosecutor. That doesn't work under the current circumstances. Now we've got people who are a lot more angry with cops and prosecutors and our justice systems. We've got shows like this. We've got entire groups of people who are really setting out and working hard to reform the justice system. And she was on the wrong side of those issues. You can hate Trump all you want, but you may want him to lose, and you may want Kamala to win, and may think she's a million times better than him. But her record on criminal justice is atrocious. And the fact that she's going to suddenly start backpedaling on a lot of this stuff, well, we can't let her get away with that on this show. I mean, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night because it's bad. And this article is going through and highlighting it. What else? We can go on and on and on. Harris, her office fought an order to reduce the California prison populations after the U.S. Supreme Court determined that conditions amounted to cruel and unusual punishment. Though she later claimed to be shocked at what they had done, Harris's attorneys argued that non-violent offenders should stay behind bars because the state needed their cheap labor. I remember reading that article. I was just grossed out. This is a woman who on the debate stages said a lot about being bussed in, about growing up as an African American, a minority, somebody who was sort of the victim of oppression and sort of ties it back to the historical remnants of slavery and all of that. Well, cheap labor, essentially what they're doing is they're turning these prisoners and the people in custody into slave labor. And she's making an argument that even though the conditions amounted to cruel and unusual punishment, their attorney and her offices are still going to be arguing that they should stay behind bars because they need the labor. I mean, it's mind-blowing to me that she was actually kind of picked to be his candidate, especially in light of what we're seeing now. I'm not real sure that it was a good move for the Biden administration. Now, she is going to backpedal, massively. We're all going to have whiplash because this stop and pivot is going to hit us so hard. She'll come out and be on the other side of all of these things. You could already kind of see that happening. She could feel the political winds shifting a little bit. And so, justice for Jussie Smollett, there's pictures of her, standing right next to him. She's got Twitter posts about, justice for Juicy and all that. And so it's not good, but she's going to continue to make that pivot. And we're going to continue to hold her accountable on this show because this is somebody who I do not want anywhere near the Oval Office based on what she does to her fellow people. And we'll see where it goes. All right, let's move on to the next story. Enough about Kamala. All right, the next story I want to dive into is actually a local article. It's from an amazing reporter here in Arizona. His name is Dave Biscobing, and he is with ABC 15, and he did a year-long investigation of Arizona and how we handle our Brady lists. We've got what's called a Brady list. So if you're not familiar with that term, if you haven't watched the show before, you're not familiar with it, here's what's supposed to happen. The Supreme Court has said that, sort of like I explained earlier, right? The prosecutors' offices, they have all of the data. They have all of the information. They know more about their cops than we do, whether they're good cops or bad cops, whether they've been in trouble, whether they've been investigated by internal affairs, whatever the situation is. They have the data. We don't. So the Supreme Court of the United States has said when the prosecutors are in control of that information, they have to disclose it to us. It's called exculpatory information. So if you've been charged with a crime and the cop who arrested you is later found to have engaged in a bunch of misconduct. This cop was singling out minorities, or he was falsifying police reports, or he was, mislabeling evidence, or whatever it is, accessing data he shouldn't have been accessing. The only people who know about that are the prosecutors and their offices. Well, they have to tell us about it because that can be very impactful in our defense. If you've been charged with a crime, but the cop who says you did something is a liar, and we can show that, well, that makes our case a lot easier to defend. Now it's you who's proclaiming your innocence and a lying cop. So we need to know that. So what has happened around the country very, very poorly is that these different prosecuting agencies will actually keep separate lists. So they'll have these different lists that they'll circulate around, and the idea is that all of the bad cops are going to go on that list, and they're going to tell us, the defense attorneys, from time to time about what's on the list. Well, there's a lot of problems with that structure. There's a lot of problems with that data and that information. And so what Dave has done, he's gone through, and let me pull this article up, but he has done a great job going through and just really detailing some of the problems that we see. So let's take a look. So under a scattered and broken Brady list system, Arizona law enforcement officials have routinely failed to adequately track dishonest and disreputable police officers, disclosing their misconduct in criminal cases and holding them accountable according to a year-long ABC 15 investigation. In 1963, the U.S. Supreme Court in Brady versus Maryland ruled that police and prosecutors cannot withhold exculpatory evidence, especially past dishonesty by officers. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. If a cop has lied before or falsified stuff, we need to know about that. And we have we've covered this many times on this show and on this channel, where cops will lie about just routine things, about mislabeling things, or about, how'd that scratch get on your car? Oh, I don't know. Somebody must have hit it. No, you hit it. You backed into that pole and you lied about it because you didn't want to get in trouble. We've covered those stories. So if a cop is being dishonest in their reports, if they're being dishonest with their own department, maybe they're dishonest with what happened in your case. That's why it's so important for us to know about these things. So here's what Dave did and ABC 15 did, and they did an amazing job. He kind of summarizes the main problems that I've been ranting about on this show for a while now. He says, through a series of public records requests, ABC 15 requested Brady lists, which is that list that I'm telling you about, from every county in the state of Arizona. This ABC also got thousands of pages of police misconduct cases, personnel files, and a database with every state police board case for the past 20 years. It's awesome. Really great work. Nice job on that. I mean, that's a lot of data, a lot of material to go through. Here are where the failures are and where the gaps are. There is no statewide list of Brady officers or official standards for what misconduct requires disclosure. Each county keeps their own list in their own way. None post the list publicly. So he's exactly right. So all of the different counties, so we got Maricopa, Pinal, Pima, Yavapai, Coconino, all these different counties, all of the prosecutors' offices keep their own lists. All right. So there's no crossover. So what happens if a cop from Maricopa County gets in trouble? Can he bounce over to Pinal or bounce over to Coconino County? Of course he can, because these lists aren't uniform. They keep their own lists, and the lists are not even kept well. The last time that I saw a list that a prosecutor was using, it was an Excel file. It was just a spreadsheet of names. And how do they maintain this list? Well, they just emailed it around to everybody. So one prosecutor would send it over, and then there'd be a main revision, and then they'd pass that around to the other hundreds of prosecutors. So prosecutors are working off old lists. Prosecutors, don't even look at the list; they don't even have it. Nobody's maintaining one centralized list throughout the state of Arizona, and none of the lists are public at all. And this is something I've had a problem with for a very long time. Why are these lists not public? What happens, let's say, for example, you're driving home on your way, from work, way home from work, and you get stopped with a speeding ticket, and the cop is on this list, or you get charged with a reckless driving or criminal speeding or some type of crime, and your cop is on this list, but you don't know to ask for it. You don't even know that maybe this cop is bad news. Maybe he's got a history of these types of, harassing traffic stops or whatever it is. You don't know. You have nowhere to look. You can't go check out this officer. If you have a bad meal, or you want to go to a new restaurant, you can check out what do the Yelpers say on Yelp? What does Google reviews say? You can go get information about this stuff, but you can't do that with these cops. They hide these Brady lists because they don't want you to know. They don't want you to see that. And these are all negotiated out with the police unions and the different counties and the different cities. And it's a big problem because we don't know, which is why for a long time I would hold up the mugshots of these cops who were arrested, and I would say, look, if you've been charged, if you were stopped by this guy right here, you may have a defense to your case, so give us a call. And we've kind of gotten away from doing that because there's so many mugshots of cops. We can't keep track of them all. So, it's one of those things that I think we should know more about these bad officers, but none of these lists are made public. There are also, according to Dave, no established punishments for police departments and county attorneys' offices that withhold or hide Brady material. ABC 15 discovered at least 175 times in Maricopa County when officials delayed putting officers on the list. So they've got these really garbage lists that are not centralized. Nobody's really maintaining them. They're getting emailed from prosecutor to prosecutor, but also there's kind of really no rules about who even goes on that list. So if an officer gets in trouble, what the prosecutors say and what, all of the city attorneys and everybody who circles their wagons around these cops, what they all say is, well, this isn't Brady material. This was just routine internal matters. And so we're not going to add that cop to the list. Well, you don't get to decide that. We want to be the ones who make that decision. We'll tell you about that cop's, whatever that cop did. We'll be the ones who can judge whether or not it's exculpatory, whether it helps us. We're not going to take your word for it, Mr. or Mrs. Prosecutor. We're just not going to do it. So they don't put them on the list. They hide the list. They withhold it from us. They'll sit in this investigation stage for a very long time. So these cops will then, rather than resigning, they'll transfer departments, or the investigation will go on for months and months and months on end, and they'll never put him on the list because they'll say, well, the investigation is still pending. He may be totally exonerated when the investigation is over. That may be true. That may be true. You guys are investigating yourselves, so of course, why wouldn't he be exonerated, totally exonerated from whatever allegations are made against him? So, it's the inmates are running the asylum over in these prosecutors' offices, and it is not good. Dave Biscobing finds 175 times in Maricopa County when officials delayed putting officers on the list. So they delayed. And as I say here all the time, justice delayed is justice denied. If they can wait a year to put somebody on the list, how many more tickets did that cop hand out? How many more people pled guilty to crimes that cop handed out because they didn't know any better, because their attorney didn't know, because that cop's name was not on any one of these lists, and the lists themselves are garbage. They have not been passed around properly. There's no centralized list at all. Another issue that Dave Biscobing found, there is no requirement for police and prosecutors to report Brady-level misconduct to the Arizona Peace Officers Standard and Training Board, which is the state agency that licenses officers. ABC 15 found hundreds of cases went unreported. So they don't even have to report them. So the prosecutors, the police officers, they don't even have to get reported over to the AZ Post, and they just never make it to the list. So they've got a terrible list that they hide information and they delay putting people on. And then there's just some people that they don't put on the list at all. There's just no requirement. The police and prosecutors just don't even have to report it, because they've made the internal decision that it doesn't count. It's not Brady material. They've decided that, but you never hear about it. You who've been charged with a crime, our clients who've been charged with crimes, they would never know. And we would never know because they would never tell us, because it's their office. It's their police department. They can manage their own misconduct. So it requires a whistleblower. It requires somebody on the inside. It requires the media. It requires an investigation by heroes like Dave, who are out there digging through this stuff. That's a lot of work that he went through, and his people and his team over there went through, and it took a year for him to do that. And he's got this bombshell report, which, by the way, is 100% accurate from my experience. He also says, finally, that Brady lists rely almost exclusively on voluntary reporting by law enforcement agencies. There is little outside oversight to ensure misconduct is properly investigated, sustained, or disclosed. So it's totally voluntary. So what do you think the likelihood is that officers who do bad things are going to tell on themselves or tell on other officers? It's very, very low. And in fact, I have a story that I'm going to get to later in the show about what happens to the cops who do actually blow the whistle. So this is a major problem, and this sort of ties back into a lot of what I was talking about with Kamala. These are systemic failures. This is happening in Arizona, but I guarantee you this is happening in other parts of the country. police, because the public doesn't know any better. They just don't know. They presume that there are no bad cops, that the cities are going to vet them, that the prosecutor's offices are going to vet them. But I will tell you this. We've been in many cases where prosecutors know, and I've had a conversation with them face to face. And if you watch the show, you know, if you're a prosecutor, I've probably had this conversation with you about this cop is a terrible person. This cop is a racist. This cop singles people out. This cop is bad news. This cop has too many physical altercations with people. Too many people are injured. Too many problems. His reports are too bad, but the prosecutors don't do anything about it. And many of them acknowledge it. I've had conversations with prosecutors who say, yeah, we know about that guy. But you know, what can we do about it? They can't do anything. And AZ Post doesn't do almost anything about it. The prosecutors don't do anything about it. There's no list. The public doesn't know any better. And a lot of this stuff, we as defense lawyers are prohibited from releasing these lists. So if we did get a list from a prosecutor and I said, I want to put this on our website, I think the public should know about this. I think they should know about the bad cops. What if they're stopped by a bad cop? What if there was a story I did last year about a cop who was charged, and we got to do a follow-up on this, who was charged with like 66 counts of sex assault and these types of just, horrendous things happening to women that he would stop on the side of the road. It was an Arizona DPS cop. His name escapes me. His picture is over there on my mugshot wall, but I can't see his name. I can't remember what it is. But my point is that there are a lot of predators out there who are hiding behind a gun and a badge. People need to know who these bad cops are. The prosecutors' offices, the politicians, the police unions, the police departments, they all don't want you to know about it. They don't want you to have any of this information, because if you did, well, then they'd have to make some changes and have a seriously hard conversation and probably fire a lot of people. They don't want to do that. The unions want to protect the cops. The prosecutors want to protect the departments and the unions, and they all just have this big, incestuous, gross relationship where, unfortunately, they get to keep skating by, but you, the public, our clients, they don't get the same benefit. So the Brady list is a major problem. When I was going through a lot of my analysis over the George Floyd protests, I'm saying there should be a national, publicly accessible database so we can keep track of these things. And I want to see a lot less of cops getting in trouble because there's nobody's keeping track of this stuff. Getting in trouble in one county, going to a different county, getting in trouble in Arizona, going to New Mexico. They just take some time off. They go be a bad cop somewhere else. Doesn't solve the problem. It's just moving bad cops all over the place. It's not good. And Dave Biscobing, who did an amazing job with his investigation, this fellow right here, Dave Biscobing, follow him wherever you follow people on Facebook and on Twitter. He does a great job. I follow him on Twitter. He's always tweeting. He really does a great job holding law enforcement and our justice system accountable. So hats off. Nice job, Dave Biscobing. Oh, we just got a subscriber. My alert just went off in my ear. Did you hear that? All right, let's go on to the next story. Other thing I want to talk about today, Twitter. I use it. I'm not super engaged on it, but I do use it. I retweet people a lot. I don't comment a lot, but I actually retweet more than I do anything else. And I've never done it thinking that I might be charged with a felony for doing that. Just a simple button, doop, retweet, not a big deal. And you would think that would be not a big deal, right? Well, unfortunately it is, because we have a story where in New Jersey, people actually they retweeted somebody else's tweet, and now they've been charged with felonies. So they tweeted, somebody retweeted a photo of a cop at a Black Lives Matter protest, and then they became felonies. So this story comes out of Nutley, New Jersey. It began with a tweet of a police officer at a Black Lives Matter protest in June and a crude request to identify him. So here's what this person does. They take a picture of this photo of this cop. They take a picture of him and they put it on Twitter and they say, if anyone knows who this bitch is, throw his info under this tweet, the tweet read. And so, is that a felony? If anybody knows who this guy is, throw his name, throw his info under this tweet, is all it said. Not his home address, nothing like that. Throw his info under this tweet. So basically trying to dox this guy, right? We talk about this all the time on the internet, getting doxed. And somebody's trying to dox this guy. Okay. So sitting home in Queens, Another person, so not the original tweeter, Georgiana Siskak, saw the tweet appear on her Twitter timeline, and then she clicked the retweet button. So she's just scrolling along. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I wonder who that guy is. Retweet. Boom. Nearly 1 month later, Siskak was issued a summons charging her with a felony. 4th-degree cyber harassment with the intent to harm or place a person in fear of harm after retweeting the post, which has since been deleted. As a 20-year-old that simply retweeted a tweet to help my friend, I am now at risk of giving up my career, serving time, and having a record. She wrote on her GoFundMe page, raised more than $8,000 for her legal bills. So here's how this works, right? So she retweets, and the cops go into psycho mode. So they're going to track these people down because they're threatening our well-being. They're threatening our safety. We don't want our personally identifying information out there in the world. And so because this person said, anybody know who this bitch is? Throw his info in the thread. Here's what the police say. So the officer, the person who is the subject of the tweet, says, in fear of physical or emotional harm to his person, specifically by reposting a Twitter post via username Georgiana, originally posted by Inaka Copley Picasso, depicting a photo of Detective Peter Sandomenico on 6/26, acting in the performance of his duties at a protest which took place in front of the Nutley Police Headquarters, stating, if anyone knows who this bitch is, throws info under this tweet, causing Detective Sandomenico to fear that harm will come to himself, family, and property in violation of the statute. So this person gets charged with a felony for a retweet for that. So, ask yourself, would that scare you? I mean, you're a cop. You're out there, sort of doing that exactly, right? I mean, you're out there trying to sort of squelch these protests by scaring and intimidating people, and somebody's going to ask who you are, and you're going to charge them with a crime for that. The felony charge carries a maximum 18-month prison sentence, $10,000 fine. The summons filed against all 5 defendants. So there were 5 people who retweeted that, and the police went and tried to track them down. PJ, who's the Detective PJ Sandomenico, the officer, feared harm would come to himself, his family, and his property. So he's very scared that, this type of stuff may impact him. And it's insane to me. I mean, I think these guys are the biggest weenies in the world. My stuff's certainly public. Most people, if you work at a business, it's public. My office is here. People know how to get in touch with me. They know my name. If somebody's creative, they could find out, where I live. I've got property listed all over the place, I don't have a lot of property, but the property I do have is listed. People you can go to the Corporation Commission and find people. You can find information about people. You don't charge people with felonies for that unless you're a cop. So it's the cops who are circling the wagons around these guys. Now, we've got some other people who are saying, from the other side, I don't know if these charges are going to go forward or not, but the fact that somebody can be charged with a crime for simply retweeting somebody else, I think doesn't make any sense, right? There's sort of 2 things that need to happen in criminal law. You need what's called an actus reus, which is an action, and you need a mental state. You need a mindset state. And so is that happening here? Is a retweet, an action that is meeting that threshold of the statute about threatening, intimidating, or any of those things? In my mind, I don't think so at all. And was there any action? Is a retweet, actually posting the information or actually making real contemporaneous threats? It's not. So what is the real purpose of these charges? Is it to seek a conviction? No, of course not, because these are not convictable offenses. They're not meant to do that. What they're meant to do is to scare the public. So this cop is out there saying, well, I'm scared about myself. I'm scared about my family. I'm scared about my home and my property. Meanwhile, they're out there scaring other people who are peacefully protesting. There are rioters for sure, and I don't condone any of that. But the people who are peacefully protesting, the people who do want to know more about who these cops are, if they're asking for information about these people, is that a crime? I don't think so. I mean, I would love to know this guy's address. I'd love to know it because I want to send him a copy of my book, Beginning to Winning, How to Fight Your Case and Succeed in the Criminal Justice System. I'd love to send him a copy. There's a lot of really good information in here about how the justice system should work and why it's so important we have good cops and good prosecutors. I'd love to send you a copy, my friend. There is a perfectly legitimate reason for people to want to know who you are and get in contact with you. So the fact that somebody's just upset with this cop or he used the word bitch in his tweet, that doesn't, in my mind, make it a crime. The real crime here is that the police are doing this to chill the speech. They're doing this to clamp down on people trying to identify their officers, which is basically as cowardly as they come in my mind. You know, they're rounding people up. They're charging people with crimes. This guy's fearful of his life. Hey, you know that police departments all over the country, especially in Arizona, they post people's mugshots right on the internet, meaning they'll get you arrested. You get arrested. They'll put your name on there, your date of birth. Many times they'll put your location, what city you're in. They'll put the charges that you were faced with. They'll put the arrest date on there, and they'll have your picture right there on the internet for all to see. So cops, prosecutors, politicians, they're all doing this, but when you do it back to them, that's when they freak out about it. And they say, oh, now I'm fearful for my life. I'm fearful for my safety. Well, what about the people you arrested and you took their pictures and you threw them right on the internet? What about those people? So you're literally in the business of doxing people every time you arrest somebody. But when somebody wants to dox you for violating their constitutional rights, their freedom to go speak and to protest and to make their voices heard about a lot of these issues, you're going to clamp down on them with the full force of the justice system. You're going to charge them with felonies that carry over a year in prison if they're convicted of these things. Are you serious? Because it's outrageous. So let's go ahead and just make sure that we can be very clear about who this whiny cop is. And his name is Detective. Let's see here. I want to pronounce it clearly and I want to put it on the screen here. Let's see who this is. We've got, okay. What the heck did I do with it? All right. So these are the people. Detective PJ Sandomenico. Yeah. So Nutley Police Detective Peter P.J. Sandomenico feared harm would come to himself, his family, and his property. I'd love to send him a book if he wants to send me his address. Happy to send him a book. Hopefully he reads it and then he realizes that it's time to grow up a little bit, my friend. All right, let's move on to the next story. We've got our very first bad judge of the show today. A very bad judge. This was one that I read and I was even a little bit like, that's pretty bad. This is somebody who was just acting with total disregard for basically any of the norms of society, I guess. All of the normal things that you think are appropriate. She basically did the opposite of that. So this story comes from the WCPO, which is out of Cincinnati. Hearings begin for the judge accused of sex, alcohol consumption, and other misconduct. Gentry is the name of the judge. She's faced with 9 counts of misconduct. Here she is right there. And so this judge really kind of was just going hog wild, having a really good time as she was being a judge. And let's take a look. So an anonymous complaint was filed in December against Dawn Gentry, this woman here, who is a Kenton County family court judge, highlighted several complaints of misconduct, ethical violations on Monday. She faced a judicial conduct commission for a trial. Complaints against her, let's go through them, include having sex in the courthouse with 2 staff members, unwanted sexual advances against a lawyer whose cases she continued to preside over, campaign violations, and more. If found guilty of ethics violations, she could lose her position as a judge. She could, or she could not. We're going to see what happens. Here's what the Judicial Conduct Commission accuses her of specifically: coercing people to contribute to her campaign, falsifying timesheets, having sex with 2 members in the courthouse during work hours, permitting her staff to store and consume alcoholic beverages in court offices, and at times consuming alcoholic beverages in the courthouse. So she's having sex, partying, falsifying timesheets, threatening people to coerce her into contributing to her campaign. She's retaliating against a school liaison officer, and she's holding pre-trial conferences in child abuse cases without all the attorneys present, which is totally ridiculous. And so that's a lot, that's a lot of stuff. I mean, ordinarily, here's the list, all of these different things she's doing, and it just keeps going on. Sexual misconduct is just one of the 9 complaints leveled against her. She's also accused of unwanted sexual advances against a female attorney from whose cases Gentry did not recuse herself after the incidents. So that is one bad judge. That is somebody who was willfully, maliciously violating the rules. And she was doing it under the guise of her judicial robe. I say the cops do it behind a gun and a badge. The judges do it behind their robes. The prosecutors do it behind their prosecutor badges. And this quote of justice that they fantasize about. So it's really gross behavior, really disgusting stuff. What's going to happen here? I don't know. Is she going to continue to be a judge? Probably not. But what about the many hundreds of cases she's presided over? What about all those people who've gone through her courtroom? The problem when people in power are so just, rotten to the core to a certain degree is it impacts every other case that comes through her courtroom. Same deal with prosecutors, same deal with cops, same deal with defense attorneys. You can get really bad defense attorneys also who are going to take advantage of you and take your money and not do anything and probably, make sexual claims, all sorts of gross stuff. There are really gross people out there. The problem is that many of these people in positions of power, they don't get held to the same standards that we do. If somebody came into my office and said, well, hey, one of your employees was threatening people to give them money, or they're gone. They're falsifying timesheets, meaning they're saying that they're doing things and they're not. They're by the way, they're having sex with the other employees in the break room and over in some of their offices. They're getting drunk. They're retaliating against each other, and they're doing things that are ethical violations under the code of conduct. Gone immediately, blackballed from the industry. I would review all their work. I'd contact everything that they've touched, and I'd make sure that it's all fine and working and good. Is that going to happen here? No, of course not. Right? She's going to go through a hearing, going to get reprimanded, stop acting like a 16-year-old, and start acting like a professional judge. But we'll see what happens. Like I said, probably not going to be a judge anymore. It's a pretty bad story, but what about all the other cases that have come through her courtroom and all the damage that she's caused, and everybody who, she's in family court, really high stakes. What if somebody was in her court and she sides with, one of the two parents, and now this story comes out? Hey, the judge may have been drunk, or she may have just gotten done, banging her coworker in her chambers, and she comes out and here's your case. I mean, it's just insane. It's like a kangaroo court. It's nuts. And this stuff needs to be rooted out, the light shined upon it. And so once again, we've got a very, very bad judge. We've got very bad judge, Judge Don Gentry, right there. Don Gentry, bad judge. All right, let's go to the next story. We have a bad popo now. Now we're going to go over to the bad popo. We've got some bad cops who are running around. This story we've got some video from, which is just outrageous. This will be good to show you. So a beach cop who cold-cocked a man cleared. Officers who released the video of the punch punished. So here's what happens. There is a Miami police officer who is in Miami. There's a bar or restaurant. This is what it looks like. And there's when I play the video, you're going to see that there's a black man and a white cop, and they're in this restaurant. There's obviously some words that are taking place. The black man comes around, and he has a name. I'll find it when I get into the story. He comes around, and we have the other officer who comes around. They get really close to each other. Watch closely when I play the video, because the cop, this is a coordinated hit. I mean, this is an anger hit. This is not a threat, like a response to a threat hit. And here's why I say that, because the cop actually grabs his shoulder. So grabs his right shoulder to basically steady his body as he throws that other punch and hits him right in the face. So you're going to see the body's kind of rotating. So that would be like somebody grabbing this shoulder, holding me, swinging this side and hitting me right here so that I don't, so I don't duck out of it. They're going to keep my shoulder in line so that the full force of the punch connects, pulling me into the punch almost. It's exactly what happens here. So that cop should be in major trouble, right? Let's take a look. Here's what we've got. So I don't think there's much audio here. Oh, yeah, there is. Let's play it again. So I'm not sure if you hear the audio or not, doesn't matter. So here's where the cops are talking. You see this is the man. He comes around. This cop is going to walk right up to him. Some back and forth. He's walking around. Here we go. All right, so he's going to turn around, gets close to his face, grabs him, and boom, he's out. Right? So it's a major hit. Any threats? Do you see any threats in that? Nothing. Grabs him by the arm and just lays out a right hook right into his jaw. Boom! So he knew what he was doing. Now, if you listen to this, for some reason, I don't know why the audio isn't playing. Maybe it is. For some reason, or what ended up happening here is, okay, so that cop who hit him, he should get in trouble, right? I mean, that's a no-brainer from my perspective. Doesn't really matter what that guy says. If the guy comes up to that cop and he says, "You're an asshole, you're a pig, you're a cracker," which is what I think he said in here. He said, "You're a cracker," or something like that. Does that justify a cop losing his cool and hitting him in the face? Absolutely not. You can't do it. It's just words. It's not a threat. It's just words. So here's what we've got, right? A Miami police officer suspended after body camera footage showed him cold cocking a restaurant patron 2 years ago has been cleared of any wrongdoing by internal affairs and by state prosecutors. Totally cleared. Nothing happened to that cop. You saw it, right? Put his hand here and just hits him as hard as he possibly can. Nothing happened. Happened 2 years ago. Happened 2 years ago. So this has been going on for 2 years. And they just now cleared him of any wrongdoing by internal affairs and state prosecutors. Why does it take 2 years for them to investigate this? Why? Because it's calculated. It's an internal review, and this cop can continue to do whatever he does. They said he was suspended. We don't know what that means, right? Was he suspended? Was he removed from the force for those 2 years? Was he put on desk duty? 30 days administrative leave, back on desk duty, back getting his pay, getting his pension. Still technically a cop, but suspended. What were the details there? I don't know. But the problem is that for 2 years, nothing happened to this guy. It's enough time for everybody to forget about it. Move on to the next thing. We've had George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor. We've had Rayshard Brooks. We've had them all. More and more people are getting killed. More and more people are in worse situations. It takes them 2 freaking years to even come back with this. And then when they do, they say, no wrongdoing. No, totally cleared. The internal affairs looked at it. Nothing there. State prosecutors looked at it. Nothing there. But guess who did get in trouble? That's right. It's the 2 other officers who wound up, they copied and they shared the video of the punch. So internal affairs investigators gave Miami Beach police officer Alfredo Garcia a written warning last month for producing and distributing an unauthorized version of recordings from his body camera. Garcia used his cell phone to record the footage from his body camera, then posted it to social media site before quickly taking it down. So he deleted it. He knew he should not have done that. If you listen to the video, again, I can't tell if you heard the audio or not as I was going through it, but it looks like it's basically that. It's the cop who posted it on his social media. It was the same video. So he takes his cell phone out. He's recording it because a lot of these body camera things are sort of behind secure terminals, meaning they will not allow you to just take the file. So you have to use your cell phone. So he records it from his cell phone. And in the audio, the cop is going, as soon as that punch lands, he goes, "Oh," boom, got him. Type of thing, like excited, like, man, that was a hell of a punch. It was a hell of a punch because it was totally uncalled for. And it was basically, one of the most, it's super cowardly to hit somebody in that manner. I mean, just embarrassingly cowardly. And so this cop should absolutely be, ashamed of himself. So Officer Frederick Dominguez, who did not see the punch in person, received notice of a 10-hour suspension for releasing a copy of the tape made by Garcia to his attorney, Michael Pizzi. The officer, according to Internal Affairs report, asked Pitsy to forward it to the proper authorities and seek whistleblower protection for him. Meanwhile, Officer Andreal Dominguez, who threw the punch, so this guy's name is Andreal Dominguez, who threw the punch, was cleared of any wrongdoing by Miami-Dade state prosecutors and is back to work after being relieved of patrol duties during investigation. So there it is. So this guy, he was still a cop. He was suspended, but he wasn't on patrol. He was doing desk duty. He was doing paperwork, still getting paid, probably living it pretty cushy for those last 2 years. Prosecutors determined that the officer used the proper amount of force after being threatened by the bar patron. They set out in a closeout memo that cleared Adriel Dominguez, who is a very bad cop. Last October, the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office said the officer could have believed that he was about to hit him. Whoa. So this cop has mind-reading abilities, and he can foresee the future. So he's got a crystal ball that he carries around in his brain and says that if somebody's about to do something, then we can respond. So that's pretty good precedent in my mind for anybody who's ever been charged with assault out of Miami. Anybody who's been charged with assault out of Miami. If you hit somebody and they didn't hit you first, or they didn't do anything first other than getting in your face, and you just decide you're going to clock them because you also have a crystal ball and you can also read minds, then that's going to be a great defense for you, because you can just say, hey, that cop did the same thing I did. There's video of it. And the prosecutors declined to prosecute that. So I did the same thing, or I did less than that, right? Most people are charged with assault. Somebody does something first to them. Somebody pokes them or pushes them, then they clock them back, and that's where the assault occurs. This cop didn't even do that. This cop just predicted what this guy was going to do or potentially do and decided to act prematurely. So, of course, this cop is exonerated. Nothing. Suspended, probably got paid for those whole 2 years, probably had a nice cushy life as a desk duty cop. And now, once the internal affairs investigation has come through, he is exonerated. But the two cops who did actually say, hey, this was totally wrong, or one of them sounds like he thought it was hilarious and he posted it on social media and then deleted it. The other guy says this is wrong, forwards it to his attorney and says, hey, this is a whistleblower thing and I need whistleblowers protection. So the police department then comes back and says, the cop who did the punching, you're good to go. The cops who shared the posting and who discussed it, you're disciplined. We're going to give you warnings and we're going to give you, what did they give the second guy? Whatever it is. They're punishing them for speaking out. This is the blue shield. This is that thin blue line in action right here. One cop does something bad, the whole justice system circles their wagons to protect him. The prosecutors circled their wagons. The internal affairs circled their wagons. All of everybody involved is now saying we're going to do everything we can to keep this cop here, and we're going to dismiss it. We're going to dismiss the charges against him, and we're going to actually punish the people who brought it to light. That's your Miami Police Department. And this story's recent. I mean, this story just came out on August 4th. It was updated on August 4th, 2020. So we've got a really, really bad officer. We've got Officer Adriel Dominguez. We got some really tough names on the show today. It's frustrating. Adriel Dominguez, who threw the punch that led to the police reviews, is nothing. Bad popo. Somebody who should be off the force, but he's back on the force. So we'll just put a pin in this one. Is this cop going to do it again? Probably. Is he going to get in trouble? Probably not. Is he ever going to be called out or singled out? No, because he didn't get called out this time. The entire Miami Police Department just said, you're good to go, man. Good to go. Don't worry about it. If you ever, they should actually promote him, truthfully. If he can predict what's going to happen next, this guy should be the chief of police. He should be the president, actually. He should probably run for office because he can tell what's going to happen next or what people might do. He can predict it. Very, very impressive. He's like a Marvel superhero, super villain. He's actually, just a terrible person. So that family, the good news is they are going to be, I think, moving forward with... They intend, he said, so the family hired an attorney. He said they intend to file a civil rights lawsuit against the department and the city in the coming weeks, arguing excessive force was used. Another interesting part here, some parts of the arrest report didn't seem to match what was seen on the video. In the report, police wrote that Poitier, which is this gentleman, which is the African-American guy, clenched his fist and took a fighting stance. Did you see that in the video? Did he clench his fist or take a fighting stance? That didn't seem to be the case in the video. It didn't at all. Let's watch it again. Let's see. Before we move on to this story, let's see. Does he clench his fist and get into a fighting stance before this cop just punches him cold? Let's look. Let's look. All right, so he's walking back around.
Boom!
I didn't see any clenched fist. His fists were below the camera. Did he take a fighting stance? No, he looked pretty squared up to me. Fighting's, kind of one shoulder back. Didn't see any of that. So this cop is a cowardly cop who just punches people who aren't expecting it, who aren't threatening him or fighting him. And on top of that, he's a liar. So in his police report, he said that he clenched his fist and took a fighting stance, which is what justified the punch. Obviously, that didn't happen from the video. He's a liar. All of the cops from Internal Affairs who reviewed the cases, they're all liars. The prosecutors who refused to press charges, they're all liars. They're all just gross people. And, Miami, you guys got to do something about that. These guys should be, this is the problem. This is the problem right here. All of the stuff that you see, all the protesters and George Floyd and all of that stuff, this is the problem. This is what's happening on a daily basis. This is another situation, a white cop and a black guy. Where's the media over this story? Where are they? They're nowhere to be found. So enough of that. This guy is a bad cop. Adriel Dominguez, bad popo. All right, and the last story of the day that I want to get to, which of course we cannot leave without talking about Ghislaine Maxwell. Ghislaine Maxwell is now off of suicide watch. Whoa. Is that a good move? I feel like we've seen this story before. Don't think we covered it on the show. I don't think the show was around back then. But wasn't her accomplice, her partner in crime, Jeffrey Epstein, also on suicide watch and then off of suicide watch, and now he's dead? So hopefully this goes better than that. Ghislaine Maxwell is taken off of suicide watch. She wants to be moved out of the solitary confinement at Hellhole, Brooklyn jail. Ghislaine Maxwell is complaining about the conditions of jail where she is locked up. The 58-year-old was recently taken off suicide watch, but is still being subjected to daily searches and constant surveillance, her lawyer says. She also wants out of solitary confinement and to be put in with other prisoners. Comes after Jeffrey Epstein died in prison. So her lawyers have actually filed a motion saying that she is being subjected to onerous conditions basically because of what happened to Jeffrey Epstein. So they're saying that Jeffrey Epstein's case is not hers, right? She's a different person and she's not going to do what he did. And therefore the same onerous conditions, the hardship that you're placing on her is unjustifiable. Right? It's unjustifiable. This is a tricky one, right? So what we have to do back is go to the principles. We have to go back to our principles of justice, right? And now let me be the first to say that this is not a popular opinion, probably. I don't know. But in my mind, Ghislaine and Jeffrey and Alan Dershowitz and anybody else who's accused of a crime related to this case, they all deserve the same due process of law that the Constitution provides. Doesn't matter the fact that she was doing some of the most disgusting things that a person can do to somebody else. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter that Jeffrey Epstein did that. They still have the Constitution. They still have rights. There is still due process of law. There still is equal protection under the law. And so she's entitled to those things. I'm not sympathizing with her, but I do agree, right? There are some problems with what I'm seeing, at least in regards to how she's being housed. And here's why I say that. And here's why it actually becomes problematic. So here's what her attorneys are saying. They argue that she has never been suicidal. She was never diagnosed as exhibiting risk factors for suicide, but she's still woken up every few hours during the night and she's forced to wear special clothing. So is that by itself a problem? Is this something that is a violation of her constitutional rights or of due process or any of those things? I don't think so. I really don't. I don't think that's too much of a problem. Yes, it's a miserable situation. It's a miserable condition to be in. Nobody wants to be in a jail. Nobody wants to be in a prison. It is bad. I've been to many of them, and they are all pretty gross. So I get that. She's used to living in luxury. She's used to living on Pedophile Island. She was found in a multi-million-dollar estate. So that's the lifestyle she's used to. If she doesn't like her new quarters, that's just too damn bad, right? Sorry, okay? You shouldn't have been palling around with Jeffrey Epstein. You shouldn't have been doing the things that the allegations claim. You wouldn't be in this position. So there is some of that I just say, that's just too bad. You're going to get woken up. You're very, very important to what we want to know about this case. You have the potential to implicate almost the entire power structure from our speculation, right? There's a lot of people who are involved in this. I covered it last show. Bill Clinton was on the plane, now is allegedly on the island. There were other major names on the flight logs like Kevin Spacey, Chris Tucker. There's other logs with, a ton of people are implicated in this. So she's very, very important. For her lawyers to come back and say, well, she wasn't suicidal. Was Jeffrey Epstein suicidal? I mean, I don't think so. I think he was pretty much normal and pretty much untouchable and bulletproof until he got locked up. Then he became suicidal. And what's to say that Ghislaine doesn't do the same thing, right? Her whole life is now upended. Jeffrey Epstein wasn't suicidal because he didn't like his life. He was suicidal because he got caught. Same story here. Ghislaine Maxwell, she may not have been suicidal. She may not have a history of suicide, but she got caught. And that's going to change her dynamic and how what she has to say about life. Now, that being said, right, there are certain precautions and things that we want to do to actually protect her. So that is not, the attorneys are approaching it. Her attorneys are approaching it from the view that, she's kind of the victim here, that all of this is necessary to make sure that she can't participate in her own defense. I don't think that's really true. A lot of this stuff is actually done to protect her, to make sure that the other inmates aren't going to harm her, or that she's not going to be able to pay off the guards, or that she's not going to get singled out by somebody who has a problem with pedophiles. Remember this, pedophiles in prison do not do well. Doesn't matter what gender you are. It's not okay to, commit crimes against children. And so when those people end up in custody, it doesn't bode well for them, right? She's got a history of exploiting very young women, grooming them to become sex slaves, and taking full advantage and partaking in those activities. The inmates, the other people in those jails, they do not like that. So the fact that they want to keep Ghislaine out of, the general population of the facility is for her own protection. Mr. and Mrs. attorneys who are representing her. We understand that maybe she is not happy there, but it's for her own protection. If we let her out in the general population and something else happened to her, then the attorneys would be right there, kind of back and saying, well, you let this happen to her. Now you're liable for the harm that you caused by failing to protect her. So some of that stuff is just necessary, and I don't have a problem with it. But there are some other issues that are absolutely relevant. So here is some of the other things that their attorney is alleging. Further, the team is asking that she be given the names of 3 anonymous women who are accusing her of grooming and abusing them. Maxwell cannot prepare for or receive a fair trial